In this Masterpiece in Taste episode, I'll show you how to create this espresso and praline tart with macerated raisins and milk chocolate ganache. And I'll be pairing this with a L'OR Espresso Lungo Profondo capsule. The flavor profiles of the Lungo Profondo has bits of raisins in there, roasty and nutty, and I think it will perfectly pair with this tart. So what we'll be doing here is to macerate the raisins, and we'll brew our coffee into the cup. Here I've got a coffee liqueur. And give that a good mix, and this will sit for a few minutes until we need it at the very end. And next up, now we're going to create our tart dough, and that's going to have the ground coffee from the Lungo Profondo itself, and I'm going to embed that into the dough. And what I'm going to do is kind of roast the coffee even further into the dough and the sablé and create this beautiful, nice tart shell. We've got some plain flour, sugar, eggs, and cold butter. So into a mixer, I'm going to grab our flour, add in our sugar, and start mixing it slowly. And from here, we're going to open up the capsule with a knife. And for this recipe, we're going to use 2 capsules. So now once our coffee is inside the flour, we're going to add in our cold butter, and we're going to work the butter into the flour until it becomes into a sandy texture. So at this stage, we're going to add in our eggs, and this is 1 egg and 1 yolk. So here we've got the dough that's come together. At this point, you want to get the dough into one big clump, wrap it up in cling film, and rest it overnight, or at least for 1 hour before you use it. And here you can see all the little coffee grounds. You can smell it as well, and it just looks absolutely stunning. So I'm going to wrap this up and into the fridge. Here I've got the tart dough that's been rested and rolled out, and I've cut it out into the right size of my tart ring, which is perforated. And what we're going to do here is have the strip of the dough and push them into the mold. Now it's okay if you have little pieces that are not fully intact, just press them together and allow that to kind of mesh into the other dough. So now we've got the outer shell of our tart. This is the disc. I'm gonna pop that in, just gently pushing it into the tart shell. And you want to tuck in the edges and making sure it's sealed with the edges. If little pieces do break and crack, you can get a little bit more of any excess dough that you have and just patch it up. Then from here, you want to trim the excess of the edges with a paring knife. Before we put this into the oven, you want to score a little bit by pricking it onto the base, and then blind bake this with grains or any beads that you have for baking, such as pastry beads or even rice with cling film or baking paper. And this will go into the oven for about 30 minutes, 15 minutes to blind bake, and then another 15 to finish it off. Now we're going to create the filling for the tart, which is the crema. And the crema is going to have a milk chocolate as the base and the Lungo Profondo coffee with it as well as we cook it into the cream. The reason why I'm using milk chocolate as a crema into this dessert is to bring in some sweetness and texture, as well as a beautiful kind of nice and sweet little callus of milk chocolate into the flavor. That goes really, really well with coffee. Now I've got milk and cream and the coffee here, so I'm going to let it bring up to a simmer, stir that through. And while that's cooking away, we're going to start whisking our eggs with the sugar. Once the milk and cream has come up to temperature and starts simmering, all I want to do now is just whisk it into the eggs and temper this. I want to strain out a little bit of the coffee and whisk into the eggs. All we're doing here is just tempering the eggs, making sure it doesn't scramble. Now once we've added the cream into the eggs, we're going to put it back into the pot, and we're going to create an anglaise out of this. So you want to use a thermometer and bring it up to 85 degrees while you're whisking and stirring. But if you don't have a thermometer, gently cook your anglaise mixture until you can see all the air bubbles go away and the mixture starts to thicken up and coat the back of the spoon. That's where you know the eggs are nicely cooked, and that's where we can add our milk chocolate. And at this stage, we're going to strain it and then pour it into a container and let it set overnight. Now for the next part of our tart is going to be the praline, which is made of hazelnut and peanuts. To make the praline, you can have sugar and make a dry caramel out of that. So here I've got a 1-to-1 ratio of peanut and hazelnut. It's gonna have a nice savory combination. Now I wanna get our sugar to a nice golden caramel. So this dark caramel here is gonna nicely coat the peanut and hazelnut. It's gonna bring that bitterness and savory notes to the tart. Now what we want to do here, we're gonna have a lined out baking tray, pour it all out and let it set. And once it's set, you wanna blend it to a nice and beautiful paste. Next up, we're gonna create our last component, which is going to be the whipped milk chocolate ganache. And it's gonna create a nice, beautiful garnish, as well as flavor and texture into the whole outlook of this dessert. Now in this pot I've got is cream, bit of gelatin and milk chocolate. I just wanna melt it gently, only enough until the milk chocolate and the gelatin melts. Now I've got everything ready to go for the espresso and praline tart. This one here is the tart that's been coated with some white chocolate on the inside. And here is the praline that we've blended up into a nice paste. So for the first layer, we're gonna spoon in the praline, and this will be the first layer at the bottom. And you wanna kind of spread that around as even as possible and not have it too thick. Next up, we've got our macerated raisins, which have been soaking in the coffee. And you can see these have kind of doubled in size. They've gone plumped up and full of delicious Lungo Profondo coffee. They taste absolutely delicious. You have this beautiful fruitiness of the raisins and you get that nice dark roastiness from the coffee. And now we've got our beautiful raisins in there, which is gonna bring some bright fruitiness to the tart. This one here is our milk chocolate crema with the coffee ground. Just gonna pipe that in. And here we've got the whipped milk chocolate ganache, which is nice and velvety. And that's gonna go on the top of the crema. And you can pipe this into any pattern that you want. I'm gonna try and create a flower with this. I'm gonna create a little indent and then spoon in just a little bit more of that praline. Adding these violets just to add some color and some brightness into the tart. And here I've got some dark cocoa powder. Just add a bit of contrast. And there we have it, my espresso and praline tart to pair with the L'OR Espresso Lungo Profondo capsule.